Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of a Rat Tribal Commander deck with Karumonix the Rat King as its general. Karumonix the Rat King hails from Phyrexia, all will be one, and is a 3/3 Phyrexian rat with Toxic 1 for 1 and 2 black mana that gives other rats we control Toxic 1 as well. Whenever a creature with Toxic 1 deals combat damage to a player, that player also gets a poison counter. A player that has 10 or more poison counters loses the game. When Karumonix enters the battlefield, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We may reveal any number of rat cards from among them and put them into our hand. We put the rest of the cards on the bottom of our library in a random order. This Phyrexian rat provides 2 powerful synergistic abilities on 1 card: the potential for mass card draw and tribal enhancement. Our generals enter the battlefield trigger helps us maintain tempo by filling our hand with rat creature cards each time it comes into play. At a manageable mana value of 3, we could reap these card drawing benefits multiple times throughout the game. When paired with a wide, tall, and evasive mischief of rats, Karumonix's Toxic 1 enablement allows us to win the game easily through poison counters. Even without this poison counter delivery system, our tribe of rats easily can overwhelm our opponents in combat. The core of this build will be sculpted to inundate the battlefield with rats, enhance our rats through tribal synergy and keyword ability mass enablement, with the primary goal of claiming victory through combat. We begin the core of this build with a slew of cards that enhance our rats. Marrow-Gnawer gives all rats fear, which means that they can only be blocked by black or artifact creatures. We also can tap Marrow-Gnawer and sacrifice a rat to create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens, where X is equal to the number of rats we control. Piper of the Swarm follows the same mass evasion enablement and rat creature token producing trend as Marrow-Gnawer. It gives rats we control menace, which means that they can only be blocked by more than 1 creature. We can pay 1 and a black mana and tap the Piper to create a 1/1 black rat creature token. We also can pay 2 and 2 black mana, tap the Piper, and sacrifice 3 rats in order to gain control of target creature. Ogre Slumlord gives rats we control Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature we control dies, we may create a 1/1 black rat creature token. Whenever Ashcoat of the Shadow Swarm attacks or blocks, other rats we control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of rats we control. Also, at the beginning of our end step, we may mill 4 cards. If we do, then we return up to 2 rat creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Imagine our tribe of rats having Fear, Menace, Death Touch, and Ashcoat's power and toughness boosts. The game should be over soon after. We can tap Swarm Guard and regenerate one of our rats. Pack Rat can flood the battlefield with token copies of itself by paying 2 and 1 black mana and discarding a card. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of rats we control. These rats are going to be big. At the beginning of our upkeep, Rat Catcher allows us to search our library for a rat card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. When Species Specialist comes into play, of course we choose rats, and whenever a rat dies, we draw a card. Speaking of choosing rats, we do the same when Adaptive Automaton and Metallic Mimic come into play. Each creature becomes a rat in addition to its other types. The Automaton gives rats we control +1/+1, while the Mimic puts a +1/+1 counter on each rat when it enters the battlefield under our control. Now let's include some rats that provide disruption and utility benefits. When Burglar Rat comes into play, each opponent discards a card. Whenever Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, deals combat damage to a player, we may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. This Rat Ninja also has a ninjutsu ability. We may pay 3 and 2 black mana and return an unblocked attacker we control to our hand and put Ink Eyes onto the battlefield from our hand tapped and attacking. Since the Declare Blocker step of combat has passed, Ink Eyes can't be blocked, which means it will trigger its recursive ability, and we will put a creature card from that player's graveyard into play under our control. Oh, those sneaky, sneaky rats. Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion, also has ninjutsu, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, we may play one of those cards, and if we cast a spell this way, then we pay life equal to the card's mana value rather than paying its mana cost. We can pay 1 and a black mana and exile target card from an opponent's graveyard with Nezumi Grave Robber. If there are no cards in that graveyard, then we flip Nezumi Grave Robber into Night Eyes the Desecrator. With Night Eyes, we can pay 4 and a black mana and put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. When the appropriately named Wave of Rats dies, if it dealt combat damage to a player this turn, then we return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. This 4/2 Trampler has Blitz, which means we can pay its Blitz cost instead, and when it comes into play it gains Haste, which means we can attack with it the same turn. If Wave of Rats is blitzed into play, we sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step when it dies, and we draw a card. We could gain a lot of card advantage through this creature's abilities. The bulk of our rat creatures are going to come from either Rat Colony or Relentless Rats. These creatures have their strengths and weaknesses, but they also share a couple of commonalities. The first, of course, is that they're rats. The second is that a deck can have any number of Rat Colony cards and or Relentless Rats cards. EDH is a singleton format, which means that every card has to be unique and cannot share its name with any other card except for basic lands. That's not the case with these two creature cards. EDH's famous deck-building restrictions are nullified here, and we plan to take advantage of this rule bending by making one of these cards the featured rat creature of this build. So which one do we choose? Let's size up the competitors. Rat Colony is a 2/1 for 1 and a black mana, and it gets +1/+0 for each other rat we control. Its mana value is very manageable, and its power boost should be massive, secondary to the number of rat creatures we will have on our side of the battlefield. The absence of a built-in toughness boost leaves each rat colony with a toughness of just 1, which, outside of any peripheral toughness boosts, leaves our rats more susceptible to direct damage removal and could prove detrimental for maintaining their presence on the battlefield. Relentless Rats is a 2/2 for 1 and 2 black mana, and it gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield named Relentless Rats. The additional black mana in its mana value comes with an increased base toughness of 2, but its +1/+1 power and toughness boost is limited to other creatures named Relentless Rats, as opposed to each rat we control. Each option is viable here, and there isn't a wrong choice, but within the confines of this mono-black rat tribal build, Rat Colony offers more versatility than Relentless Rats. It is the preferred selection for the purposes of crafting the core of this build. In either case, adding Thrumming Stone is as much as an auto-include as there is. Spells we cast have Ripple 4, which means whenever we cast a spell, we may reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We may cast spells with the same name as that spell from among cards revealed this way without paying their mana costs. We put the rest of the cards on the bottom of our library. Upon the initial triggering of Thrumming Stone, as each copy of Rat Colony or Relentless Rats is revealed and cast for free thereafter, Thrumming Stone is triggered again and again and again. We easily could cast every copy of Rat Colony or Relentless Rats in our library in one turn. Imagine the looks of horror on our opponents' faces if we trigger Thrumming Stone during our last opponent's end step through the flash enablement of the Dalkin Orrery. We could empty our library of rat colonies or Relentless Rats before we untap during our next turn. The game should end soon after. For additional multiple cards of the same name rule-bending synergies, for 1 black mana, we can cast Echoing Return and return each copy of Rat Colony or Relentless Rats from our graveyard to our hand. If this is not sufficient, then we can cast Secret Salvage instead. We exile target Rat Colony or Relentless Rat card from our graveyard, and then we search our library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and put them into our hand. This sorcery ensures that our hand is filled with rats longing to be tilted sideways and attacking our opponents. Now let's add some generic tribal synergies that will enhance our rats even further when we choose them as our preferred creature type. Cover of Darkness provides some evasive redundancy by giving all rats fear. Obelisk of Erd gives rats we control +2/+2, and its Convoke ability allows our creatures to help cast it by tapping them for colorless or black mana. Icon of Ancestry gives rats we control +1/+1, and we can pay 3, tap it, look at the top 3 cards of our library, reveal a rat creature card, and put it into our hand. The rest of these cards are put on the bottom of our library in a random order. Door of Destinies gives our rats +1/+1 for each charge counter on it. We put charge counters on Door of Destinies whenever we cast a rat spell. This artifact is going to have a lot of charge counters on it, making our rats very, very big. Eldrazi Monument gives creatures we control +1/+1 flying and indestructible, and with the high number of rats scampering around our side of the battlefield, we should have no trouble sacrificing one of them to the Monument's upkeep trigger for the purposes of keeping it in play. Although it could enhance our opponent's creatures as well, Coat of Arms potentially provides game-ending boosts to the power and toughness of our rats. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. Caution must be exercised when deciding to cast the spell. A safer but less impactful option is Mirror Box. It gives each non-token creature we control +1/+1 for each other creature we control with the same name as that creature. This artifact boosts the power and toughness of our rat colonies and relentless rats, but our other rats do not count towards these power and toughness boosts. The box's modest +1/+1 boost to legendary creatures we control and negation of the legend rule are not as needle-moving as its Coat of Arms-like ability. Vanquisher's Banner provides an anthem effect for our rats, and whenever we cast a rat spell, we draw a card. Speaking of drawing cards, if the top card of our library is a rat creature card, then Herald Horn can put that card into our hand at the beginning of our upkeep. It also reduces the mana cost of our rat creature spells by 1. Pact of the Serpent has target player draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of rats we control. With the potential of flooding our side of the battlefield with rats very high, this sorcery could knock an opponent out of the game for just 1 and 2 black mana. Through a process that we may repeat any number of times, Ad Nauseam has the potential to put a ton of cards into our hand at instant speed. We reveal the top card of our library and put it into our hand, and we lose life equal to its mana value. Bolus's Citadel offers a different type of card advantage by making the top of our library an extension of our hand. We may look at the top card of our library at any time, and we may play it. If we cast a spell this way, we pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. As a potential game-winning ability, we can tap the Citadel and sacrifice 10 non-land permanents to have each opponent lose 10 life. With our tribal tendencies in mind, let's play with a copy of Kindred Dominance. We can rid the battlefield of all non-rat creatures, paving an easy path to victory with our Mischief of Rats. For the purposes of tribal-related recursion, Patriarch's Bidding and Haunting Voyage serve this build well. With Patriarch's Bidding, each player chooses a creature type and then returns all creature cards of their chosen type from the graveyard to the battlefield. As the tribal archetype is quite popular in EDH, we must exercise caution when deciding to cast this spell. No caution is needed when casting Haunted Voyage for its 4 tile cost. During our turn, if we pay 2 and exile this card from our hand face down, then we can cast it on a later turn for 5 and 2 black mana. When we do, we return all creature cards of the chosen type from our graveyard to the battlefield. And our opponents are left watching as our side of the battlefield becomes infested with rats, while theirs remain the same. Aside from poison counters and lethal combat damage, there are other ways we can utilize our rats to claim victory over our opponents. Whenever we cast a creature spell, Bantu's Monument drains each opponent for 1 life and we gain 1 life. Ayara, First of Lockthwain, has a similar life drain ability, except it triggers whenever she or another black creature enters the battlefield under our control. We also can tap her and sacrifice another black creature in order to draw a card. Gruesome Fate doesn't care what color our creatures are or how they got onto the battlefield. All it cares about is how many creatures we control, as each opponent loses 1 life for each one of them. With a mana value of just 2 and 1 black mana, this is a sneaky good win condition in this type of build. Due to the potential robust power of our rats, Altar of Dementia can be considered a win condition here. When we sacrifice a creature to the altar, target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Absent any auto-shuffle abilities from cards in our opponent's libraries, we should be able to mill an opponent's library with ease. We can allay our preoccupations secondary to any potential auto-shuffle abilities by including a copy of Leyline of the Void. If this enchantment is in our opening hand, then we may begin the game with it in play. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, then it is exiled instead. This is a replacement effect, so any auto-shuffle abilities do not trigger because our opponent's cards never go to the graveyard. Let's bring an end to this video by including some cards that synergize with and enhance our rat tribal theme. Jet Medallion reduces the cost of our black spells by 1. Defiler of Flesh allows us to pay 2 life instead of a black mana to cast black permanent spells. And whenever we cast a black permanent spell, target creature we control gets +1/+1 and gains menace until end of turn. This conversion from black mana to Phyrexian black mana allows us to use our life total as a pseudo-mana resource for casting our rats. When paired with Jet Medallion, we could cast a copy of Rat Colony by paying only 2 life. Carnival of Souls provides a different type of mana in exchange for life dynamic. Whenever a creature enters a battlefield, we lose 1 life and we add 1 black mana. The life-draining abilities mentioned previously in this video help to hedge against the losses of life from the Defiler and the Carnival. Speaking of mana, we add 1 mana of any color whenever we sacrifice a creature to Phyrexian Altar. For targeted graveyard recursion, we include Phyrexian Reclamation. If we pay 1 and a black mana and pay 2 life, we return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Chroma's Memorial gives our rats flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. Since this build can put numerous rats onto the battlefield in 1 turn, the Memorial's haste enablement may be its most valuable keyword contributor. Although building around videos such as this one tend to leave mana ramp and the land bases up to each individual deck brewer, we would be remiss if we failed to mention the impact of Extraplanar Lens. In any monocolored deck, Extraplanar Lens can provide a massive boost in mana resources if utilized strategically. When the lens comes into play, we exile target land we control. Whenever a land with the same name as the exiled land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. Since we're playing mono black, Swamp is the most featured land in our build. If we exile a Swamp to the lens's imprint ability, then any player that taps a Swamp for mana gets 2 black mana instead. Why are we giving our opponents resources to try and win the game? We're not. Not here. Instead of skewing our land base towards swamps, we're going to replace them with snow-covered swamps instead. It is far less likely that any opponents with black in their EDH decks are playing with snow-covered swamps instead of swamps. This way, we restrict the double mana producing lands to just snow-covered swamps, of which we have a plethora, and our opponents, most likely, will have none. Hopefully, we'll still have some opponents that want to play Magic with us after the game ends. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of a Rat Tribal Commander deck around Karumonix the Rat King as its general. Removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for crafting the core of a Rat Tribal EDH deck, in addition to providing ways to optimize this theme. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.